Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today it is Poetry Thursday, so I wanted to talk about some good poetry that I read recently. I had taken some time off from Poetry Thursday due to the sheer number of commitments that I have relating to work. But I'm back, and I'm really happy because I get to talk about unusual poetry, strange poetry, just the weirdest kind of poetry. And today I want to talk about a poem that is about government-sanctioned death, of all things, and feelings of guilt. I am referring to After the President's Speech, You Dream of Corpses by Todd Hearon. For those who don't know, Todd Hearon is a Massachusetts poet who is also a playwright. I believe he's taught some English classes in his time as well, and he's most recently written a novella, something about geeses. I'll put the title there. I've forgotten about it, but it's an interesting title, and I kind of want to check it out because of that title. Also, something of note is that Todd is married to Maggie Dietz, who I've talked about on this channel before. I've highlighted her poem, November, which, based on that and based on the couple poems that I read about Todd, it seems like their styles might be what brought them together and how similar they are. One of them may have even influenced another. I just think it's funny that I've encountered like two poets who are married, and I've talked about both of them. Just something funny to note there. Without further ado, though, let's talk about this poem. I will read it, do a brief analysis, and we'll move on from there. After the president's speech, you dream of corpses. Those bodies that last night stormed the bosses in your brain, some picket line or strike, and were beaten down so brutally, batoned corpses piled the streets, men and women naked, massive, Blakean physiques. Where are they now? Anonymous, faceless, in the mass grave, your minds become at the morning after dream. So you are the mirror of your times. A century rots forgotten, storyless in you. Sepulcher, articulate and ambulating tomb, packed carnal house, dead to the very eyes. Where will you be that morning when they rise? And so that was After the President's Speech, You Dream of Corpses by Todd Hearon, a pretty fascinating poem. I had to read it a couple times to truly understand what it was talking about, because at first I thought it was merely the author's guilt about knowing about the casualties of perpetual war. But after giving it some thought, I really think that he's putting the onus on you. It's right there in the title, After the President's Speech, You Dream of Corpses. And I think he's trying to call attention to all the things he's talking about in the poem. The brutally batoned corpses that pile the streets, and how they're faceless in a mass grave of your mind. Like, what's up? Like, why are you constantly forgetting that this is happening? Yeah, I think he's calling attention to a public that so often forgets that because the wars are not at home, as they are in America, that they're easy to forget. That the war in Iraq is just something that happens, and it doesn't need to happen. These people don't need to die senselessly in their countries for our lives to go on. And we're just fueling a war machine that doesn't need to exist at this point. I also like how this poem is sort of structured in a two-part kind of way. You have the first part where it talks about you, the narrator's saying that you dreamt about these bodies in the streets who were brutalized, and then at the midpoint in the poem it says anonymous, comma, and then it goes on to talk about you yourself, about your dream, and about how this is just a reflection of the times. And I really think it's interesting, the images that the poet is outlining, and then in the next verse saying that you have this dream. Why is it so easy to forget that this happens? And ultimately saying, well, this is just a sign of the times. You are no different than everyone else who has clearly forgotten about the horrors of war, and what's going to happen. Like when this comes back to roost, like it did on 9/11, like countless wars in the Middle East led to terrorist cells rising up and striking during 9/11. Although that was more to do with Saudi Arabia than anything else. Don't tell them I said that. The point is that like if you forget and you don't pay attention to these atrocities, it's going to come back to bite everyone in the rear. So I do like how the poem is structured in that way. I do also like the end of the second verse, where Todd says, "So you are the mirror of your times, a century rots forgotten, storyless in you, sepulcher, articulate and ambulating tomb, packed charnel house." Like words that just stand out. Packed charnel house, articulate and ambulating tomb. All these stories are within you, and they die because you forget. And I think because those words are so like powerful, it helps this poem stand out in my eyes. Like another person could argue that that Heron is trying to impress too much with his word usage. Like, look at my expansive vocabulary. But I think it calls attention to the horrors that is happening. And then the last element of the poem that I like is the sort of final two lines where it says, "Dead to the very eyes, where will you be that morning when they rise?" And I like that for two reasons. The first reason is because this poem does not rhyme on its own. I don't think there are two lines that rhyme throughout the poem, but the final two lines do. And I think Heron is really trying to call attention to those final two lines. Like, they're dead to the very eyes, but where will you be when it comes back to bite you? As I was saying before, like, that's very standout, very interesting way of articulating that those who we thought are dead maybe aren't so dead. Maybe the idea of them will live on for good or for worse. But another reason that I like this is because of how powerful that final line is, how much of it stands out. Where will you be that morning when they rise? Like, you can be quick to forget, but it's not going to end there. And I think that's a very powerful way to end this poem. I absolutely love how Heron structures this poem and how he leaves you with a quick punch, because it's very easy to see like how one could think of this poem. This was written in 2007, so at the height of the Iraq War, at the Afghanistan War, when a lot of people were dying, not only soldiers on our side, but also the people in Afghanistan and Iraq, the citizens of those countries who were dying senselessly for a war that didn't really have too much of a purpose, because those countries weren't responsible for what happened during 9/11, as opposed to others. But that's getting too political here. So yeah, and a very interesting poem that I think is necessary to understand, like, throughout history, especially at times when there's wars going on that have no just cause in the end. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the poem After the President's Speech, You Dream of Corpses by Todd Hearon. I'm going to put a link to it in the description. Let's talk about this poem. There's a lot to discuss, a lot to pick apart. One thing that I noted in this poem was Blakean physiques, which I didn't talk about, but you could question why he chooses to use the word Blakean, of all things. If you read this poem before, you simply want to comment on something I said, again, comment below. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about Poetry Thursday, if they don't already know, and they can read this poem if they haven't already. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and corpsey travels. Farewell.